Lethe of Hades is for space nature transfer. This is more probably what the ancient science of pantheism, also to see through its own ism, to see through our isms, to be stay and to stay, make sure we're staying, being led by the identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. Its identity to the extent we could discern, which comes with its complete identity relationship to itself and the value of that only increasingly, simultaneously increasing, where understanding equality begins, equally increasing. In other words, we are a human species body of individual bodies, again abridged from the system where all group differences of other species bodies too are being generated as demonstration slash as of that which also appreciates a special difference, hyper especially positive onto itself here as its system by positive and negative, or is it forced from here? And it makes the distinction between nature shows us the difference between criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, let alone if nature shows us ones in collusion with the hyper foreign that had slavery sickly distinctly, for example, northern colonies and southern colonies. Even though we have no overt slash insidious demonstrations of everyone having been tortured, extorted, and enslaved. Fact, chibi nature, therefore, physically enforced roles, otherwise that body would be sensed. Rather than value that, people are role collusions pretending that's debatable and defending need to defend themselves, need to self-value where and how. They have replaced what our founders declassified, we already know. They did not have free speech. But we have the experts on them using their speech, leaving out and replacing what they communicated about that. And replacing this very scientific value of the breach method itself. We're not supposed to address how and why we're having to have negotiations with economies, with countries A through Z, including our own, leaving out and replacing and rolls with that when our founders communicated about this. Why and how the breaching method was entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies, why and how they had to leave that entrenched with slavery against everyone sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. And no one could even address how sickly non-distinctly even always means to cause positive everywhere at once. The only means to cause positive out of nature progressions, acts, and natures at locations A through Z since semi-ancient times has been to self-value roles with, and the only means to counter negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. The only means it's self-value roles along with criminal insidious natures of means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures as the only alternative. More and more, and or as roles with all exceptions, exception nature, with our own at countries A through Z, locations, areas, and states A through Z, sensing when there are exceptions, even if that body is a majority of people that it starts to respond properly, and that is adapted to, even if it was an entire country. Any grouping of countries to counter all that, this kept and kept as hyper-additional apparent and real motivations for roles with it, that right where no one wanted roles, at locations, areas, and states A through Z, everywhere the species body is, there's a hyper-foreign name, a presence, not just beginning with the scientific value of the human fact, true nature, breaching method, replaced right from the communications of nature itself and of our founders. In other words, we're supposed to understand it's declassified that their motivations about about how and why they started protesting taxes and things like that with their syntax. That was only because of all at the same time they were forced to do it. And to hide simultaneously by the breaching method forced them to do it. But our founders forced them too, distinctly. And they were forced to pretend other motivations than were real. The real motivation is James Madison's plan. That's what counts. It's an affront to kids It's worse than criminal incompetence, A through Z, of the names of the people of sciences. Difference in where they call themselves, like against the kids in the campuses when they say our founders had roles with slavery, and they're using the truths as lies. Our founders had to hide their roles with our founding as it actually was. Our founders had to counter-extort the other founders and force them to be, because they were roles with torture, extortion, and slavery. In other words, and our founders are distinct from our presidents. And no one allows anyone to be honest about George Washington. And simultaneously, they have delusions at the same time, incapable of discerning it. They have self-valued roles with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw education to themselves. So when we have the nature of the debate regarding history, ancient, modern or American history, you guys have replaced what our founders communicated to communicate for themselves and for James Madison and his plan and its roles with the American Revolution to force the North and South to be united with that plan or have no means to defend themselves. And from what? It was the breaching method itself. Because the differences of guilt as this country that was rolled with that colony's possession or the country, the difference of that is also recorded being and haven't been used remotely. Wherein how it's self-valued in the defenses of the nature of debate. Wherein how it's relative, wherein how we have hyper-relative. We have people pretending passions, emotions, care for free speech. Examples of it that are being used to hide how they are roles and our nature simultaneously, and the difference of that being used to prevent free speech. And they never stopped having collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes and manifest negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures imposed upon our subject treatments like violence and the differences of guilt of the interbranch overt criminal enterprise, the private one terrorists. It was this time collusion /S and their cover-ups of uses of differences past while being and haven't been used remotely. Each age of fact should be nature. Boxing. So Earth has an special difference, only the extent of it is debatable. And where and how people debate that or the value of it, the significance of it, it comes to demonstration /S too. For example, of Earth's special difference being forced away from here as our negative identity of relationship to the identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. That shows us it is not our species body, it is not the other species bodies, but it is all things anyway. And it shows us how and why with our value state here. Are hyper invisible, but still so, or it is forced from here. As forced space nature transfer. And nature being an identity, a word hyper-additional for identity. For the same reason, we need more than one word for the identity of a verb. We need a verb for the word of a verb. We need predicate as a name of a main verb. We need participle natures, a present participle, past participle. I'm referring to them as natures because every complete identity has a semi-nature relationship to its complete identity, the complete of all space such existence, but through their own complete identity /S. Right where and how nature itself is forcing us to be valued simultaneously, unified and simultaneously forced independent species body of individual bodies. All group differences are showing us ants or /s that are being and haven't been replaced. We are shown the identity of relativity / hyper-relativity replaced and called this theory. People, yeah, black pupils, see, discern. I've been trained not to be able to discern, decipher, with the famous American sentence, don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. It is not because the kids have not done their homework. It is the differences of guilt, this preaching method made hyper-criminal foreign influences to have countries A through Z blame criminal foreign influences on things, to maintain them, measure and maintain them, only capable of doing that. Blaming things that it caused and keeps, like hyper-criminal foreign influences that had the possession sickly non-distinctly through different countries and companies, overt criminal enterprises, and private ones. News locations, exceptions to that. The difference of it, the array is used as systems totalitarian roles. Otherwise, that body was incensed. Quantification of identities of integrity that have never been anything capable of other than a hyper-foreign breaching method screening role /s. So it's recorded. I don't know, or a bunch of people tied to them, and I don't know them. I only know two of their names. I never saw them in my area. One's named Mike Delfero and John Delfero, and they have other brothers, and they have a father, and they have extended family members involved with probate court judges. And I never saw them around campuses either. They're putting fake things in campuses with the people that work at campuses, including fire campuses and the campuses that train the people with the fire campuses. They have rules with investigations. Investigators use remotely criminally foreign influenced, and the rules with differences racketeering, worse than war crimes. Yeah, it's also some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme with the Delferos and with the fire departments and with probate court judges involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, identity theft, fraud, slinders, where they're putting predicate acts with facts and databases. Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, fake being at the police station, and then as an adult. And then they cover that up by putting fake things with the news. Weird how their motivations are also recorded as recorded. There are names at and next to each of the campuses I went to attached to fake and changed ties to me, natures of ties to me. Completely made up ones too, including on digital. They're changing and faking what actually is digitally recorded, including Connecticut's roles of whiting forensics with World Trade Center predicate acts, also with Connecticut news locations in their sources, and the differences of guilt, also as their roles increasingly with names at and next to the state corrections offices. People are increasingly tied to a Lance Cuddy. I never saw a Lance Cuddy inside a campus in my life. I saw him one time from a distance, like in other words, near the state capitol. He's involved with people from my grammar school said that intelligence on my street is involved with him. And further with child abusers, leaders of kids, with Mayor Gold's family and self, and his rules putting fake things in databases with my from other classrooms, with my teachers behind my back, and in my face with the same thing, trying to make fake exceptions too, is one of the things I noted on a mass scale. All natures of investigations, investigators are used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically, collusions, raw, and their campuses. That's one of the things that is recorded where and how. People have been pretending passions and emotions regarding integrity, but they have black pupils and whites of eyes left out. They have natures of principle treatments that can't defend that and afford to have discerned. The methods and natures of predicate acts of facts methods, wire crime acts of facts methods, falsified police reports, identity theft, fraud, slander acts and methods that multiple police departments have and have had. The gateways to all natures of industries originally and still to keep this. People that are going to blame other things other than themselves for nature's increasing demonstrations of a human fact, human nature breaching method being one of the things true always, that those laws were originally and still, where and how they are still originally and still pretended other, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. At country's A through Z, the rest proceeds. Lethe of Hades. This breaching method shows the people that have been using words like success. How can we have a success? The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. And the people wanted to build safer, better identity relationship to the grounds and identity relationship to itself. All exceptions, the nature of debate contains proofs of the same, but you guys can't do it on paper. That's relative to the interbranch forging and switching names, wire crime acts and methods, digital crime acts and methods. Facebook itself has rules with whiting forensics when I was a kid and when I was an adult, with a bunch of people with their extended family members with different last names. Recorded also timed collusion /S with different natures of abuses of each age of fact treatment nature, intercities, and people involved with untimely deaths years apart where there were timed use/uses of that recorded. Even on Facebook. And when with their readings of statutes and precedents are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. We don't have to be, I'm not even a lawyer. I don't have to be a lawyer to discern that. We don't have to be. A Trantolo, many ways, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. His sources, roles with interbranch names on off the state judicial branch offices, on off the state corrections offices, and roles with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, their sources, their family members, their campuses next to them, planting evidences, wire crime acts and methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders. This is an identity theft, fraud, slander method that replaces what nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes. How we are shown that it's the difference of its body, which is different from all other bodies. Well, not. But anyway, in many pray, vaccines. So they have roles with takes on pantheism as many gods. They speak about the ancients like they're ignorant. And they have self-guided roles with this because it is measured and maintained that countries individually grouped together. They have criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw quality aspects of fact treatment nature, a Boolean logic, therefore A, therefore B logic, and natures of logic, and relative to exceptions and exception nature. How nature actually provides them as itself to us, distinctly from us, but non-distinctly, and simultaneously hyper-simultaneous, per how we can discern it. All learning English was revealed to be taught this way. Many pray because the sciences have been abridged voices since some ancient times, so they cannot afford to have discerned correctly why and how the Old Testament, for example, says at the beginning of it, no, only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together, and the part that comes before it, and that's before the part with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and people don't even know about that part per science, though, because these are also people with atheism, who have collusions with people with criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions wrought, takes on religion formally, who also have collusions with that in the syntax of people involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, abusers of each age of factory nature, middle age, kids, elderly, and veterans, multi-front by a breaching method. That's recorded too. People have been using the examples of freedom of speech, like pretend they have the right to debate, just to pull off uses of those criminally foreign influence factory quality aspects. And nature's manifest only because we have replaced our founders' communications to us, which demonstrably they communicated not to interpret their words, leaving out how they did not have free speech because it was a method entrenched that sensed everyone through collusions with them against everyone else, syntactically in other ways. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including that body was a majority of people. It's a difference is racketeering method worse than war crimes. Consciously replacing and having replaced and having had roles with it itself, replacing, having had replaced. How nature shows us we have different color eyes, same color eyes at the same time. Because of the identity, its identity of value progression that has the other species' bodies too, distinctly with two eyes, but non-distinctly, simultaneously. So we could discern there's a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, needing to be obligated to be discerned by the voices of discernment, but alone the names of the people, the sciences, and obligations by them originally still forsaken, shown needs to blame that and what it causes, which the breaching method knew what would cause that before they knew it, on other things, others ourselves, while getting over on us doing that, going on the regular people. In other words, all natures of where they have people doing homework or where they have them spoken to, the differences of that and that is also used criminally for an influence. Right where and how we can do something about it to make it better than perfect. We have to begin with these principles that are hyper-native pure and then imposed upon Native Americans before Christopher Columbus even sailed the ocean blue, because it had already been imposed upon the phenomenon of locations A through Z. Every single place the human species body has an individual body. There are proofs that originally united and led still functionally by that identity that it shows us we can reveal evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere if we appreciate differences the way it is showing us it is generating them, and how we could generate through an systems tactical theory from its own, but it will demonstrate to us. But this breaching method employed those demonstrations too. Blamed on other things, others themselves, and roles needs and natures reliant upon that. And I knew that they would have to pretend others as styles, as suits and ties, counters, exceptions, with differences, racketeering worse than war crime, while pretending and having pretended other, because being and having been used remotely relative here. So the methods involved. It is recorded how all natures of investigators have been used remotely relative to the abuses of themselves. The same way I have them recorded abusing other kids and quoting statutes and precedents, formal and informal. And the difference of that too, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, and the difference of that. So in other words, people have not been following mandated law. How they get away with this is they attach people when people have to speak about things intercities, they're putting people in fake conversations. They're forcing the people around them to enter the conversation and then make confessions tied to that. And they don't understand it as a confession. But they're doing that because they're just covering up how all nature's investigators and of that are already being and haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign, tactically, delusion, raw. They already recorded themselves painted into corners of as collusion/S, including the leaders of the prisons and the corrections offices of Connecticut and the judicial branch offices, increasingly involved with the names at and next to the World Trade Center, including a court next to it. The court itself, with names on all sides of it and their sources, brought up as their rules recorded intercities of Connecticut and trust cities and off the campuses, planting predicate acts with facts. Fake ties, fake transcripts on campuses filmed 24/7. No one's even watching. Increasingly, the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices are used remotely with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases and news and names that next to the crime scenes at the same exact time. Same thing with the body dumping spots, again, because there are other things involved. Not one identity of integrity of any nature of it had it. And that's not an insult. That's one of the things that is recorded, where how Black people's white civilized communications were replaced. So don't change or fake what I said about with WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack. As Connecticut's Channel 3 News that has had rules with names with a whole bunch of different countries, interstates and internationally. Washington, D.C. has a number of ties to a Mike Pandolf and his educators involved with people on all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions. That have been collusion/S with the crime scenes with a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and other sick things. Same people that have been speaking about things like crimes and elections and location/S and their differences. This breaching method is replacing, has had rules with everyone replacing. How and why nature shows us we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. While it is showing us that other species' bodies have different eyes differently than us, but have the same, non-distinctly too. It comes down to showing us it's a distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous/hyper-simultaneous relationship to itself. Increasing one way, special difference to itself as a simultaneous nature. One way as a hyper-simultaneous nature that won't juxtapose with matter, life. And one way where those two, where it won't and will only juxtapose and they are only increasing value and volume here or force from here. Two, as a special difference relativity/hyper-relativity. Nature itself obligates us to discern the needs to discern the identity of the hyper-simultaneous and how it is functional, being hyper-invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is the invisible but still discernible that comes with the physical but still discernible. So discernible. Like this is how English and other languages were revealed to be taught, because they were revealed through perfect appreciation before it became criminally foreign influence/hyper-criminally foreign influence. And again, from off those locations, other names of the people of sciences, to increasingly hide behind increasing hyper-additional apparent and real motivations from the one that is really the one we have to deal with. Ooh.